going to share quickly something for me with addiction. Since we stopped doing the show about a year and a half ago, I mentioned it's a successful show because we have 100,000, over 100,000 views on YouTube. We have over 32,000 downloads in the podcasts in the last year and a half. Our most successful view is Sid's talk on thought and alcoholism, which has a combined views of over 10,000. And so we found a certain success in it. Now, what's interesting is I primarily am not been involved, know much about addiction, and yet I've written 2 books on it. And the power of what I understand is the healing power of the 3 principles, which I really call the spiritual healing power that heals mental health problems, addiction problems. Yeah, we'll talk a little bit of the combination of how addiction and mental health works together. And so within that, I got known as the person who talks about the spiritual nature of addiction. And that's what I emphasize. And as we left the show, what I noticed was something quite interesting. I got clearer and clearer what healing is. It's a space. And whenever that space is touched, there's healing happening. Not necessarily answering how people want to get off addiction, but that's what happens. They get off addiction when they touch that healing power deeper and deeper. And the other observation I'm going to quickly make is how much easier it is to have a client who understands the 3 principles and help them compared to a person who has no understanding of the 3 principles, no understanding about going inside, and how much more difficult it is to help that particular person. So I'm going to switch it over first to Mark. And Mark is a living example of somebody who I and many other 3P practitioners helped. And I cannot remember anything I told him. I cannot remember even why he got help, but he did. And so that's what I want people to understand. What is the healing? Not information, we know that. Not attacking the problem, we know that. That's the psychological model. I have a problem and let's fix it. We're not talking about any of that. And as far as I'm concerned, anybody who gets it on that level is still not deep enough. So what are we talking about in terms of healing? And Mark, what did you experience? Just, whatever.
Well, I'll give my background in that. I'm a man approaching 60 years old, and it's half my life really when I think about it. 30 years ago that I had a problem with my back. I injured my back badly, and my partner at the time said it would be a good idea for me to use this over-the-counter painkiller, which contained opiates. And over the next 10 or so years, I off and on took this over-the-counter medication which contained opiates, getting some kind of buzz from it. I knew that I kind of got a glimpse into the fact that I was addicted when about age 35, and I was married, and my father-in-law found the packets and said, "Hey, Mark, these things are addictive. Do you think you may be addicted?" And my first ever words spoken in what is not known as conscious denial was, "No, I'm not addicted. I'm just taking them because, I get headaches, I get back pain, realizing all the time I did, until at one crisis point where in my 40s, my blood pressure was so high because these tablets contained so much sodium that my body sodium was out of sync with the potassium, that I was on very strong blood pressure tablets. until I realized that I was addicted to codeine. And I thought the wise thing to be then, because the internet was about, was not take the tablets that contained the sodium, but buy the codeine directly online. And I did that for a number of years. And I honestly cannot remember how much I was taking until um, about two years ago or so now, 2.5 years ago, when we went into lockdown. And for me, in my own brain, it became now a real crisis because I frightened myself as to how much of these opiates I was taking. Uh, I was taking them on an evening only, so I was living the whole of the day, waking up and then going into withdrawal until eventually on the evening I would take the drug. It was at that point that I came across the three principles and across both Harry and Bill Pettit. I spoke to Bill and then I spoke to Harry, and Harry was absolutely fabulous with me. He gave his time freely, and I would say the the message that came across was not an intellectual one. It didn't come from the intellect or the mind. It was more of a feeling in the call that actually I was no longer a victim, that I actually had a choice. And it was as simple as that. That sudden realization that, after the talk with Harry, I sat in the garden and I said, you know what, Mark? You're actually picking these drugs up and putting them into your body. And that's a conscious act. You can choose not to do that. It may be painful for a number of weeks, but at the end of the day, you're going to be a healthy chap. And that's what I decided to do. And I just stopped taking them. Went through normal cravings. Cravings are just, um, if you don't give in to them, they can't kill you. And it was the wisdom, the understanding of that, your body does withdraw from these drugs. But at the end of the day, that is not a thing that's going to damage you as much as the drugs are going to damage you. And so I accepted that. And I accepted that I would not look in the past and only to the future of being healthy and a life without drugs, because that was suddenly in 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 a split second, realization, as Sid said, just one thought that I was in my power to do that. I had control over what I did, and it was the fear, the anxiety around the fact that I was addicted was suddenly gone, and I was able to say, no, I can throw those drugs away, and I can live a life without them. And that was over. How long ago was it, Harry? I don't know, 2 years?
Sure, whatever you
2 years
say.
ago? Yeah, or a year and a half ago. I forget now, but yeah, I think it was September 2019.
What was interesting about that, Mark, was we didn't talk about addiction.
No, we didn't.
We
Yeah.
talked about the spiritual nature of who we are. And that's all I know about. That's all I can share about. And what I've seen is that no matter what the problem is, once that spiritual nature is exposed to the person, which means we are experiencing it together, not I am teaching you and I am doing it to you type of thing, where we are experiencing this feeling together, spiritual feeling together, that heals anxiety, insecurity, fear, uh, panic, uh, lack of confidence, bad relationships, uh, anger, sexual fetishes, overeating, undereating, uh, and the whole myriad of things. Uh, was that how you did you experience that as it was kind of like something that came into you that you opened the door to?
Yeah, it's something that came into me as a feeling. And when I sat and contemplated it and felt the feeling after talking to you, it was also a feeling as if a huge weight had been lifted off my shoulders. That, you know, the anxiety, the worry of addiction was gone. Because before that meeting, I thought I was powerless over it. I had no power. That was what my intellect was telling me. I had no power over it, and that addiction was going to kill me. And post the meeting, so after the meeting, I thought, no, actually, Mark, this is a choice. In life, you do have a choice. And it's a choice whether or not you're going to take that drug anymore, or whether you're going to continue to take the drug. You've got two ways you can go. You can continue to take the drug and be an addict and probably die from the addiction, or you can choose not to take the drugs anymore and follow the path, which, I honestly don't know the roots of addiction. I can only say that. And I don't want to know the roots of addiction, if I'm honest. I just know I've experienced them in the past. And but the one thing that I got from it was that it was a personal choice from a feeling, and that I was no longer governed or managed by the fear of addiction. Yeah.
I want people to understand he's not talking about an intellectual choice where his willpower made this decision. This is something that he saw. He connected to God, or he connected to spirit, and that connection made that clear to him. We others will repeat the same words, but they're talking about intellectual choice.
Mhm.
That is not anything to do with healing. That is ego. I cannot force myself to do anything with a long-term emotional, psychological, spiritual, loving direction. That comes from the inside out. And when you listen to what Mark's talking about, A, I didn't do it. B, he did it. C, he connected. That spiritual warmth flowed into him and changed him, transformed him. And that's everybody's story out there. 100% of you are going through exactly the same thing, except it has a different description to it. Well, welcome, Greg. Nice to see you. Late for your own show, I might add.
I
But
was sitting there like nobody else is showing up.
oh,
I don't know. I don't know what happened. I clicked that link a few times and it kept sending me back to an empty room.
okay, okay. Well, welcome. How does what Mark talks about? How does that sort of relate to what you experienced? Because Greg also had what we call a moment. You know, what George Pransky talked about insight, called it a defining moment, a defining, you know, when you, does that feel similar to what you experienced, Greg, when you walked away from addiction?
Yeah, I mean, it just happened. Like you said, Mark, it wasn't really necessarily a conscious decision. It was just something shifted. I just saw things differently, and it made it difficult to keep doing what I was doing. It's like because once you know better at that deeper level, it hurts a lot more when you go back to it. It's that kind of thing that the spiritual consequences are much higher once you've seen the truth. That's really what it's about. And it really isn't about willpower. Willpower might keep you off of things for a few weeks or months or even years, but until you actually get to that root cause and heal that, you'll always have the other issues. And the root cause is really just simply that there's some kind of subconscious thought pattern going on. And it's usually originated by not wanting to feel something that we're feeling, or just wanting to feel better. We don't even have to feel bad in the first place. We could be having a good time and want to have a better time.
Yeah.
And the next thing you know, we're kind of hooked on something. And it's really just, it's just that subconscious pattern. And what happened is just, you saw it. There's nothing we need to do. You just saw it for yourself, that wasn't you.
Yeah, indeed.
And one of the more interesting things, Greg, is that although I can't create that feeling, I saw it in both of you. That I can do. I can see the power of spirit in people. That I can do. I have freedom to do that. Most people don't look at it like that. But when I met Greg, Mark, and Greg, when I have gone over our story quite a few times on this show, we both expected to talk to each other for a few minutes. But we saw the depth of each other's insight. And when I saw you and heard you, when you talked on the show about pain, I saw you. I could feel you. And that's when I invited you to the mental health transformation group, is because of the depth of this spiritual feeling that had been expressed through you. So what we do is we can recognize the power in people. And we recognize it because it's the same depth that we have touched. So by touching the spirit, you can see it in other people. And here's the best part for me. Greg and Mark have healed Harry. That's the best part for me. Like, I mean it. You guys have healed me because you have shown me that it's not just me, it's everybody. And that common spiritual feeling is so delicious. It's so wonderful to see a smile on your face. But the best part of that, Mark, is to see a smile on my face. That's the one I like. Like, I love that you have a smile, but I like that I have a smile too. It's like being around kids. You know, you're around your grandkids and you can't help but, it's the same with you two are my grandkids, you know, except a little bit older and a little more hair on your face, type of thing. But that's what it is. How about you, Joe? How did you see all of that healing power, that unity of oneness that we're talking about, that connection to God, that spiritual direction that transforms us from, I got an image that I'm a sickie, to, oh, I have total freedom?
Yeah, I mean, even though I never had an addiction, I know about labels because I was given mental health labels and had obsessive compulsions, which to me is another expression of trying to escape our thoughts and the feelings. And when I saw that, it's just another construct in my mind, another story that isn't true, that's just limiting me. And that actually beyond that, there is what we get through that feeling, and we see that connection to each other and to everything. And I know that actually what was going on in my head isn't true. It is just that mental noise. And that when I see beyond that and that goes away, there's nothing to escape, because we can't escape ourselves. But it's because we've got a misunderstanding of who we are, that we think we need to numb the pain, numb the thoughts, numb the feelings, when actually we don't. We just need to allow them again to pass. And then we touch that, we touch our divine self, because our divine self is what's behind it, behind the show. And that is just an act that's put on top. And then once we see that and we touch that feeling, we know that to be true. I mean, it's not a concept or an understanding, because once we've actually experienced it, it's an experience, and an experience is beyond the mind, beyond thought. And so what we express in the outside is just what we are at that moment. And that's not us. I mean, that was just us in that particular each moment, and our level of consciousness, then our level of understanding. And so, yeah, I know that actually that's not me. That's not who I am. That is just the costume that I was wearing at that time. And that always behind it all, when I feel that vastness of myself and that perfection that we all have behind our masks, and that, yes, that whatever happens in the outside is a temporary expression, whereas the other thing is the infinite, and that we're always going back to that anyway, naturally, when we just let go and stop fighting and stop trying to run away or try to escape. And so for me, yeah, it's a big shift. And then every time I get that insight or that realization comes through, it shifts. And then I can see the beauty in myself and everyone. And when I see people who express that, it's just tapping me on the shoulder, going, reminding me of what I already knew. So yeah, that's been a big change for me always. And I always know it's just 1 second again, and I just have another shift.
Yeah, and it's continual. It's continual. Once you drop the story, the costume, as Joe says, it's the same. Whatever your costume is, that's why we're not really talking about addiction or mental health or illness scenarios. We're talking about a costume you put on, and you're playing the clown, or you're playing that particular thing. One of the interesting things, Greg, with Joe, was that he had a very deep spiritual experience and misinterpreted it. So he was afraid of it. And this is something I want people to understand. When you go inside, you can still, with your thoughts, put misinformation, misinterpretation about it. And that's primarily what we've been doing all our life. We have these inside experiences. All that defining moment was for Joe was something he had experienced many times, but this time he saw it. And when we talked on a show, he talked about a mystical experience that he had when he went inside, and then he thought it was bad. So people are continually misinterpreting their spiritual experiences with a label called bad. And then one day he heard it from me, but he didn't hear it from me. He heard it from inside himself. He heard, oh, it was a good experience. And the moment he heard that, everything changed for him, because he wasn't feeding. See, you can have a spiritual experience, but if you paint it black, it still feels black until you see the truth of it.
It makes me think, Harry, sorry, but I'm running short of time, but the experience I had with the loss of my 16-year-old nephew just a couple of months ago, which in the past, I know for sure that would have been every excuse I needed to use opiates to dull the pain of that, what felt like a feeling of shock at the time when he died unexpectedly from an infection in his colon. Instead, we talked, and you shared the feeling that yes, it was what I'll be feeling is sadness, but to understand that that is a feeling that I can just allow it to wash over me, and know that it will wash over me and then it will flow away, just like a river flows into the sea. And that's how I experienced that sadness. And I experienced it without using any drugs or anything at all. I just felt it and knew that it was a natural reaction to the loss of a loved one. It was very, very sad, but in time, healing comes. And it did. You know?
Right away, in fact, the healing came, because you
Yeah.
just changed your mind which is what Sid says is the answer to every problem in the universe. Just change your mind. But you just changed your mind of what of it. You saw something very, very important. How does non-duality and duality work together? How? And you saw that the grief that you were experiencing was spiritual.
Mm.
And once you saw that it was a gift from God that was a washing through your body,
Yeah.
you saw exactly how it works.
Yeah.
It's like everything, Mark. Once we see how it works, we know what to do with it. It's when we don't see how it works that we have a problem with it, because we have misinformation. But what I noticed was once you heard that, it was the same experience that Joe had. And I'm willing to bet, even though I wasn't there, Greg, that it's the same experience you had. We have 4 people who have all had defining moments in their life. And I'm willing to bet, Mark, Joe, and Greg, that it's the same feeling. Oh, what a relief. And, oh, I'm home. I'm home. I'm back home. The outside circumstances, even the death of such a loved person, was part of the human condition and the spiritual condition of life. And spiritually, Mark, you grew so much in that second. We could say you jumped time. You jumped years and years of time, years and years of suffering, needlessly suffering, when God was providing you with putting you in her arms and cradling you. There is no problem with addiction if you see it correctly.
Well, one thing though is that a spiritual awakening or experience or whatever you want to call it is not always a relief for people, because what tends to come along with that is heightened sensitivity. So we feel things more deeply and more intensely. And sometimes that can be very uncomfortable for a lot of people. So I just want people to understand that whatever your experience of awakening is perfectly normal. There is no normal for it. You know, it's just like for me, yeah, at first it was this great relief, but then suddenly I'm more sensitive to things and I feel things more deeply. And at first it was just like, how do I do this? How do I just, like you said, Mark, you know, how do I just allow it to wash over me? How do I just be in that space and not try to fight it? You know, so if that's you, if you're just feeling like kind of overwhelmed by things, it's okay. Just be with it. It will pass. It will fade. And you'll get, it's not that it really fades, it's that you'll get more accustomed to being that much more sensitive to your own emotions and those of everyone around you, because we're all connected. And that's been proven by science, that we have this energy that we send out, especially from our hearts, that could be measured from a great distance away. Depending on the study, it's, you know, the distance changes, but it can be felt from farther away. And you think about like what we're doing right now on this Zoom chat, and we've got 4 people in 4 very different areas of the world. You know, we're not very close to each other, but yet we could still feel that connection. You know, we could still feel love, and we can still pass on those wonderful feelings. So there's something there, that connection between us, it spans all distances, because distance is an illusion. It's part of this game that we're in, this human experience. You know, where we come from and who we truly are, there is no distance. There is no separation. There's just love. There's just connection. So when we first tap back into that and feel that again, it can be pretty intense. And that's okay. just let it wash over you. Let it just have that experience.
Yeah, and Greg, it's interesting you use the words it'll pass, because I haven't suffered with anxiety when I decided to stop using drugs. Those are words that really helped me a lot, was the wisdom to know that things do pass. And it's a thing lost on people who do suffer from anxiety, perhaps anxiety attacks, is that, you know, the human body is not built to undergo an anxiety attack, which is going to last for half an hour. You know, you may have an anxiety attack, but because of its very nature, it will pass. You just got to allow it to do its very worst. You know, even confront it and say, come on, do the very worst you can do to me now at this moment. And the moment you do that, it just, you take the energy out of it. It's gone.
And it's just part of the personal experience that people are going through. They've had an insight. Quite often, when people were listening to Sydney Banks talk, which we obviously didn't understand, 2 days later, we would have an insight. It took us 2 days to digest it. It's a lot. Greg is right. It's a lot of energy. And we're not used to it, especially if we've been really in a negative reality for a long time. We're not used to this transformational experience. So some people take 2-3 days. In reality, some people take 2-3 years. Some people take 2 lifetimes. But the point is, you've had it. And that's one of the things when we're talking spiritual, we're not talking about fixing a problem. We're talking about soaring. The ability to rise above this material psychological reality that we call the human condition and lift our souls into unknown. And what these us four guys have found out is the unknown is a lot more delicious than the known. We too feed our brains and our biochemical negativities with misinformation. Yes, I confess, I do. But it's so much less than misinformation I used to feed myself into. My ego, my arrogance, I care what people think about me. All of that nonsense is part of the known. And isn't it the truth that the thing that we're the most bored with is our own thoughts? Aren't we the most bored with that? Isn't that the absolutely stalest, stinkiest area of our lives? And what are we wasting our time? And yet, I am. But with the spiritual juice of being able to soar, it turns out it isn't actually bad. It's just part of the natural progression of going up and down.
Exactly.
Greg went up and down, and then he just experienced something sweeter way to experience up and down. Mark went up and down, and then he said, oh, I can still do my work. I could still use my intelligence, and I can enjoy it. Oh, and I need money, so I might as well work, you know, which is, by the way, Greg, what one of Mark's biggest realizations. He decided to quit this good contract job he had. And then all of a sudden he said, oh, shit, man, I need money. And that's where he went.
Bills, yeah.
So this misinformation that Joe fed himself, this misinformation I fed myself, that's just part of the known. The unknown is where the healing is.
It
Before
doesn't necessarily stop when we have a spiritual experience, though.
No,
When we have
good
that
point.
awakening
Good
experience,
point,
we
Greg.
still fall for the illusion. We can still slip back into it. So that's a normal part of this experience. We're supposed to be here to have this human experience. There's a reason we're here for that. I don't know what that is. I don't claim to understand that side of it, But I know that we're here for a reason in this human form. And there's a reason why we forget who we truly are when we enter this body. We're supposed to be experiencing this stuff and at some point awakening to the truth. But it doesn't preclude us from falling for it again.
Exactly. And it brings a point. One of the things,
Harry, I'm so really sorry. I'm gonna have to leave.
thank you so much. I really appreciate you
bless.
Thanks,
coming
Mark.
on, Mark.
Yeah.
Really, I really do. This is great.
I
Well,
really enjoyed it.
yeah. It was fun, eh? Yeah.
Good to see you, Greg. Good to see you, Joe.
You
Take
too,
care,
Mark.
Mark.
Take
Good
care.
night.
Have a great time. Yeah.
I'll do. Bye-bye.
One of the things, Joe, that I noticed with Greg that I learned the most, because, you know, as I mentioned, I don't know anything about mental illness, even though I'm the lead coach in the transformation group. And I don't know anything about addiction, but I know about healing. But one of the things that Greg really went, and I'd like this to be sort of our concluding little subject on what we're talking about, was the word relapse, which is the human condition of going back into a bad habit type of thing, or an interpretation of what you had. And Greg taught me the most about relapse, because we step back into, like, especially with alcohol and drugs, it's very easy to see what a relapse is. You're back, you lose your cell phone, you're in jail, you've lost your wallet, and everything, you lost all your money and all this stuff, and you feel really guilty type of thing. And two things I'm going to just say, and then I want Greg to talk a little bit about relapse, and you then, Joe, as well, talking about stepping into that negativity scenario type thing. In what Greg always said about relapse is if you fall off the horse, just get up, get on the horse again, and keep moving. Don't think, just, it happened, big deal type of thing. And the other thing that I want to emphasize in a client that I had when he relapsed, two things, Greg. First thing, it's the only time he listened, because he was disappointed in himself. The other times he was sweet. Oh, you're fantastic. I'll never do it again. Next day he's back doing it again, type of thing. And so the only time he listened was after relapse. And I started to recognize, oh, good, he's had a relapse. I could teach him something. I can point him in the right direction. And so that was really kind of showed me something. And the other thing I noticed with relapse, that my main job was to make him feel good again, because he was feeling bummed out about himself. You couldn't teach anyone while they're in this bummed out state. That's what AA, that, oh, you're guilty, you're this, you're that. I can't do that. I don't know that. Oh, that's a good hat you have on there. And so I found my only thing I was interested in is lifting the spirit. And once the spirit was lifted and the person didn't feel guilty, bingo, we were back home again. And boy, were they relieved that they weren't scolded. Boy, were they relieved that I didn't tell them, oh, did you get a tough love lesson from that? No, it was just about raising the level of consciousness. And once that feeling came in, well, the rest of it just took care of itself. And they listened. So Greg, could you talk a little bit about relapse from your perspective? Because I've learned just a ton from your teaching on this subject.
Yeah, it doesn't even just apply to addictions.
No.
Because mental health issues are actually caused by the same thing as addictions. It's just a thought pattern is all it really is. And when we try to make, because here's the thing is the real key is that we cannot just get rid of a habit that we have, because nature abhors a vacuum. We have to replace it with something new. We have to replace it with that habit we'd rather have. Even if, you know what, if you're in some really terrible habits and all you can find is one habit that's just slightly better, go for it. Because once you're into that habit, then you can more easily find one that's even better than that. But while we're in that process of kind of creating those new habits and new thought patterns, just you're rewiring your brain. And those old neural pathways are much easier for those thoughts to pass through. You know, it's like a super highway. It's been used so many times. So when you're trying to make the new one, it's completely normal to just slip back to the old one. But if when we do that, we beat ourselves up over and go, oh, I shouldn't be doing that. I know better than this. I'm a coach and I coach other people with this. So there's no way I should be falling for it. Like, no, that all that does is create more of those negative thought patterns and make us feel even worse about ourselves, which is going to make us that much more likely to go back to those old habits. But if instead, like you said, Harry, if you fall off the horse, just get back on it. There's no need to shoot the horse. You just fell off. Just get back on it. Get back to riding. Don't make a bigger deal out of it than it needs to be. And I know people like to, because yeah, you know, if your drug of choice is something really harmful, yes, it could kill you, you know, if you go back one more time, but it didn't. Right? You're there to feel bad about it, so it didn't kill you. So just move on. Keep building that new pattern and just leave the old one alone. Just let it be there. It's like a stray cat. If you keep feeding it, it's gonna stick around. Just let it go. Just observe it and be like, oh, okay, cool. It's still there. I'll just get back to this new one. You know?
Or just move on with no thinking, no attachment to the past experience.
Yeah.
And it's neutral then. See, that's what higher level of consciousness is when you relapse. It's a neutral experience. It's a spiritual experience. It's just a continuation of a thought. It just thought went down, went up, and you see how it works, but you're not emotionally attached to it. And the more objectivity that you experience inside, the easier it is to just get back on the horse. And when you get back on the horse, you quickly forget. It's interesting. The past is wiped out much quicker when you don't think a lot about it and don't feed the contents of the thought. You see, Sid talked about thought and then the contents of the thought. And if you keep polluting the contents of the thought, you're taking a spiritual experience, a spiritual thought, and filling it up with pollution. Your pollution of your bad habit, which turns out not to be the drugs or the alcohol, but turns out to be your misinterpretation of thought. And the moment that misinterpretation of thought is put into thought, guess what happens to the thought? It appears a little different. That's separate realities. But the reality that you come up with is, oh, as Greg says, just get back on the horse and start riding. What happens when you start riding again? You start smiling. Oh, Jesus, it's nice. That hurt my bum, but oh boy, this is cool. Look where this, come on, let's see what you can do. And before you know it, you're into the passion. That's what happened to Joe, Greg. He got into the passion of, oh, I don't have to, now I was nice to be free of my past, but ooh, look where this horse is taking me. Go ahead, Joe, talk a little bit about what we're sharing about relapse and in your own words.
Yeah, what came to me is because there'll be times I'll get complacent or cocky or arrogant and think I've got it sussed, or I think I'm there. And for me, the relapse is just to show that actually there's still more for me to see, more for me to find. And then when I'm in that state, it's an exciting journey. And I can see that actually that was the burning off of the old me into the new me. And when I turned to that actually, yeah, that is part of the journey that I had to go through and I had to experience, because I'm burning into the new butterfly, that I had to go through the suffering and the chrysalis and the pain. But the pain, even when I went through paranoia, I saw it taught me that lesson about thought, what thought is. And each thing is that lesson to teach us to see beyond and into the deepness. And then once, at the time, I might not like it much, but afterwards, when I see for what it truly is, and it truly is that lesson there, what we need at that specific moment to find what we're looking for within inside ourselves, beyond the thought and the concept and the judgments. I don't have to judge myself. I can just know that actually, yeah, there is always that perfection, whatever anyone does, because we know it, don't we, really? We just pretend we don't know it, and we just temporarily believe things. And so, yeah, there's beauty in everything.
Can you talk a little bit about not only the transition from, but what it's meant to you in your like you mentioned to me the other day, that your mom is so happy that you've calmed down, and so
Yeah.
you don't scare her anymore, is what you told me, or your words.
Well, yeah, and I saw, well, she said to me that it has an influence on her as well. Now she's calmed down as well. So when she's had issues, or what she defined as issues, she doesn't have to have the same reaction, the same anxiety about it. And other people as well, when they see that actually there's another way to believe in the fear, and that in that situation, you don't have to believe it's the situation that's causing it, because they saw where I was and where I am now. And maybe my physical, like the outside situation hasn't changed, but my whole attitude has shifted. And people are naturally drawn to that because they see that actually, yeah, that's living proof. And when people see the living proof, I mean, how can you deny living proof? I mean, there's not a textbook, is it? Or something that someone's just told you.
Well, let's talk about what I've experienced is people can deny the living proof, but there are certain ones who cannot, who are automatically attracted to it. Because that's what happened when Roger Mills, who was the first psychologist in the three principles, so he's the originator, and when George and Linda saw how much he changed, they didn't like what Sid was saying, but they could see it in the proof. Of course, there were other psychologists who saw Roger, didn't see any change at all. So it's an interesting thing, but you're right. The fruit is the proof. And in your case, the transformation in your personality, the transformation, this calming down that you talk about, that doesn't scare your mother anymore. But more than that, you become the son of her dreams, because there's only one thing your mom really cares about, Joe, whether you're happy. That's all she really, I mean, we all want our kids to be successful. We don't really care. We really care if they're happy, that's good enough, type of thing. That's the love that's sharing. And within that, what have you seen, like, in what you've been able to express differently than what you mentioned, your relationship, but what else personally have you been able to experience?
Well, I mean, I used to just take everything personally, what people say to me, and it would really affect me and really make me annoyed, or I might say things back to them. And now I can see that actually, yeah, it doesn't even matter what other people think or say, because it's they're stuck in their thought created reality, what they think to be true. And I can see, rather than being angry at them people, that I can see the compassion for them, that they're suffering from that too. And so for me, it's been a big shift that I can just not get into arguments with people, not have to impose my view onto them, or even get annoyed what other people say. I don't have to be frightened of other people's opinions or people's beliefs. And that, because I know that just as my thoughts are not true, their thoughts are not true too. And so for me, yeah, I don't have to have fear anymore of like what my perception and what my image is. I don't have to defend an image. I don't have to create an image. I don't have to believe and have anything to defend. And every time I get affected by that, I know it's just because I've got caught in the image again. and I didn't realize it. And I can see, well, actually, thank you, because you've taught me again that I got caught in that. And so actually that was part of my lesson. And so, yeah, I mean, I don't have to blame other people or even blame myself. I mean, I was so blaming myself and had the image that, well, people don't like me, or I've messed up here, or I've caused this problem or that. And I know that actually, yeah, I don't have to worry about that now. So I don't have to worry about what happens in the world, rather than always projecting into the future all the possible scenarios that I feared could happen, or just blaming myself for something in the past and getting stuck on it, even little tiny things that I can just let that go and see that, yeah, okay, I learned from that again. Now I know a bit more, and I've learned a bit more, and I've grown a bit more.
Do you have something you want to say before we, I just want to say one more thing and then we're going to call it a day. Do you have anything you want to add to what we've been talking about?
I would just say probably the most important thing is learn to be gentle with yourself and find your tribe.
Right, right.
Find your people, find people who, it's not that they understand you, it's that they at least try to understand you. You know, it's just, you know, find some accepting, fairly like-minded people.
That's
It
it.
doesn't have to be three principles, you know, and a lot of what I've been doing since we stopped recording these was exactly what Sid said to do. Go out and live your life. Plain and simple. Take this understanding, go live your life. Just being that kind of example is enough. It'll change people around you. You don't have to become a coach. You certainly don't have to go through $100,000 coach training package and all that BS.
Nonsense. Yeah.
Just be you. Go be you. Whatever that looks like in the moment. And it may be different from day to day. Just learn to love yourself and you know, as best you can. Just be good with who you are and find other people who accept you. Outside of that, nothing really matters. Because you can, you know what, it's there's plenty of people out there who don't have money. There's homeless people who are the happiest people in the world. And then you've got people with the most money and they're just miserable, half of them. You know, it's not about money and things. It's about the relationships that we have with ourselves, especially, and those around us.
Beautiful, Greg. That's really, really beautiful. And I'm going to, the key essence, in my opinion, to having a transformational experience away from addiction or mental illness or anxiety or whatever it is it's your experience inside you. And as soon as you give the power to anything else except yourself, you can't hear it. You dilute it. You have to hear what's right for you and trust it. And it's like the difference between night and day. When Joe started his experience, he always wanted to give it away. Oh, we need to have another 3P icon on our thing we're doing. Oh, I have to need you, Harry. Oh, I need. And the essence of the message that Greg and Joe and myself are giving is you have to trust your own voice. And until you realize that's God talking to you personally, that's your personal experience, that will release the unlimited potential. In my 2 books on addiction, the first one is when I was talking about addiction and there had to be light at the end of the road. My recent book, which I feel is 5 years ahead of its time in 3 principles, will not be accepted by the community for another 5 years. It's too spiritual, in my opinion. It's my bullshit, you can call it, if you want my opinion on that. But you notice he's free, totally free, not free of addiction, free as a human being, free to experience the beautiful sunset that is who he feels inside himself. He has walked away from being contaminated by addiction, but he's walked towards something that Joe and Greg and Mark and myself are pointing toward. It's an unbelievable life, guys, when you leave the past behind. It's just an unbelievable life. And it's so much better than what I could have possibly imagined. I'm 75 years old. I'm just a baby. Oh man, it's great. Maybe I still have a few years. Maybe I can still beat my son in tennis. Maybe I can go on a holiday to Cabo and have a good time. Maybe I can just be myself. With that, folks, have a great time. And thank you very much for a beautiful sharing. Thanks, guys. Wow, this was a lot of fun. Just a second.